Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guests are the team behind the upcoming 8-issue series at Image, 8 Billion Genies. It's Ryan, Browne, and Soule. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
How's the day going? Wait, so Ryan, you're in Chicago. Charles, where are you at?
I'm in New York.
Oh, how is New York?
It's good, big state, bigger than Illinois, not as big as Alaska. So
That is for damn sure.
There you go.
It is a thing we're very proud of, but at the same time, we have amenities that, or you guys have amenities that we certainly lack. Ryan, how you doing?
Good. It's snowing here. It's very sad.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah. As you can see, I'm wearing a snow hat to celebrate that it is snowing here.
I hate to call you out on this, Ryan, but, listeners at home, you're just hearing audio, but we're here on video. And I can tell you right now, it is not snowing where Ryan is. There's no snow on the video. He's wearing a hat. That was true.
No,
there's no snowfall.
Yeah, no, it is snowing in my house. It's just upstairs. I left all the windows open, but you can't. I'm in the basement, so you can't see all the snow piling in.
This is a little insight
living
into
room
what's
floor.
like working with Ryan. Constant fabulism.
Yeah.
I
mean, you got to have somebody that's willing to invent on the page, and if you're going to be willing to invent on the page, you have to be willing to invent in real life too.
That's true. It is a huge strength in his creative process. It is a freaking nightmare, person to person.
At some point I would love to do a little conversation with you, Charles, where you really think hard about it, and then you tell me the most shocking thing that I have done to interpret or change one of your scripts.
I mean, I feel like we have a good opportunity right now. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, has there ever been art where I turn it in and you're like, that's amazing, I can't believe you thought of that, or why did you do that? That's not what I was getting at.
No, I think I take extraordinary pains to make sure that my scripts give you exactly what you need to draw, right? So sometimes I pull way back and let you work your magic, which is really what it is. Like when you take scripts and do your thing, and the particular visual inventiveness that you have, I'm being serious right now.
Yeah.
Is extraordinary, and that is one of the things that I think is the best about working with you, is that you do surprise me all the time. You do draw things that I never would have thought of in a million billion years. But at the same time, if I'm looking for a very specific thing, I mean, you've seen the way I do. Like, for example, I just gave a script to Ryan yesterday for 8 Billion Genies #4, which is one of the books we're going to be talking about today, I assume. And in the beginning, I wanted to, on the first page, there's a point of view shot, and I wanted something very specific in terms of the way that I wanted that to be delivered on the page. And I don't always drill down this hard, but in this case, I did what I sometimes do and gave him specific visual reference for the type of thing I was looking for, to sort of explain what a POV shot was to him.
It was some Google image searches of the term POV. And they're very, very funny. They're very, very, very funny. He puts a lot of pretty solid jokes. There's one issue where you explain Star Wars to me for a page.
I love that.
You wanted Wizard to be shooting lightning or something like the Emperor, and you explained what Star Wars was to me. And you had some pictures in there. That was pretty solid. I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but one thing I've realized is I don't think you've ever written what the weather was supposed to be, or what season it was supposed to be, in any of the scripts you've ever given me. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, they're going outside, they'll be wearing jackets now, or they're in t-shirts, or you've never been specific. So I've always thought one of these days I'll just draw snow everywhere in the middle of your script.
Well, you know what? I again have to call BS on one of your silly stories, because in fact I did have a script where I specified the time of year and the season, which was our world famous X-Men collaboration, Hot Claws Save Hanukkah. Do you remember that one?
Yes, that one pager we did. Okay, there you go. Because all of our we did seasonal specials for curse words, and I didn't draw any of them. They were the fill-in issues.
Mm-hmm. So you never had any of the seasons. You didn't know what season it was.
No, he's never written to me, character A is wearing a swimsuit or a snow hat. Or
Ryan, if I do, I will go into extraordinary detail about what the seasons are, how they operate, what they look like, how people might be dressed, all of those things. I'll give you everything you need. Don't worry. Okay?
Okay. All right.
You do know what Star Wars is now, though, which is very good.
Finally.
Yeah, finally.
There was another really good one. Okay, this is actually my favorite one of these script things. There's a lot of them, but there was one where I wanted, there was an airplane. You remember this one, Ryan? The airplane travel?
I hate this one.
There was an airplane that was traveling, the airplane's travel direction was from basically New York to LA, right? So it was traveling west. And so I said to Ryan that the airplane should be pointed on the page to the left. And he didn't like that because his view was that if an airplane is going, it should be going
left to right.
To the right on the panel. If it's going back, it should be going the other direction. And I said, well, yes, except this airplane is traveling west, not east. And so I want to convey to people that it's traveling that direction. And it was a bit of a hullabaloo between us. And so the way that I explained to him the way that I wanted it to work was I took a picture of an airplane. It was a fighter jet that was oriented with its nose pointed to the right of the panel and its tail pointed to the left of the panel. Obviously, that's not what I was looking for. So I rotated it 180 degrees so the airplane was flipped upside down. And that is the reference image I gave him in the script, because that way the nose was pointed to the left and the tail was pointed to the right. And we got it done. That is collaboration.
Well, people read from left to right where we live. And so all motion in comics needs to go from left to right. Also, it will feel a little clunky. That airplane drawing looks like it's an airplane just floating in space, like a Harrier jet or something. It does not look like it's moving forward. And that drawing drives me crazy. But you got what you want.
I had a patron question that was basically about your process, because I feel like you two complement each other in an unusually effective way, or at least I did before we started actually talking about it. The patron Dennis Hoffman said, Ryan is a wonderful artist who has more of an absurdist satirical approach for comics. It almost feels like improv sometimes. Well, Charles is a fantastic writer who seems like the exact opposite of Ryan in that he seems like a meticulous planner. What's your process of working together? So is it always like those two situations, or is more often than not, is it less battling over Harrier jets?
That's interesting. I'm glad that Charles comes off as a meticulous planner. He's a meticulous planner in life, but I think when you're writing, Charles, I think you just have such confidence in your ability to figure it out, which, I have that in myself, but I also am not, I have no ability to plan. If I try and plan out a story, it's terrible. Whereas Charles can plan a story. But I think frequently when we work, part of why it works so well is that, Charles feeds off of the art that I give him from the scripts. And then he, will re-dialogue some stuff to make it work better with the drawings I'm doing. So it's a lot of back and forth. And, that goes with like the amount of play that he'll let me have in the script. He doesn't give me Alan Moore Watchmen scripts that describe every single thing on the wall and, great detail or whatever. They allow me to have a little bit more play in them. So yes, Charles is a meticulous planner, but also I think on a lot of these, he has just full confidence he'll figure it out, and he always does.
Well, I try. I think the way that I approach stories, and this is true of any of the long running stuff that I've done really, and licensed or not licensed, any of it, is I have like, it's kind of like looking through a telescope, right? So like you can see things that are far in the distance, and you're going to get there. Like you're looking out into space and you can see planets and things, you're going to visit them, and where you're going to go, where you're going to end up. But what might happen along the way, the little detours you take, the way that the details, like pop in, right? Like when you're playing a video game, I'm throwing all these metaphors out. This is writing. I'm writing right now, live on the fly.
I'm loving it. I'm taking notes.
So when you're playing like Grand Theft Auto 3, like in the olden days, right? And you would be driving out in the country, and far in the distance you would see a mountain, but it wouldn't have very much detail. But then as you get closer to it, the details pop in. I think it actually is called pop in. And so that is basically what happens when I'm writing these scripts. I can see the mountains in the distance, I can see the planets out there, but then my brain starts popping and the ideas come in. And a lot of that is spurred by Ryan's ability to not just like character designs, it's the bits of business that Ryan inserts into panels, into the background. And now that I've worked with him for, I don't know how many issues of comics we've done, Ryan, it's a lot. It's a lot of comics together. And even more than that, just like, shooting the shit and hanging out in vans together, which sounds weirder than it is, but
But you did a van tour.
Yeah, we did. We drove around in the van for a month. It was amazing. So I know where to let him do his thing, and I think he knows where to let me do my thing. And I think, like, even early in Curse Words, I remember us having a lot of conversations about, like, so what is this going to be? Like, why are we doing this? Don't you think maybe, and I would be like, it'll be good. Don't worry about it. It'll work out. And it did, and it does. And I think 8 Billion Genies is a refinement of that process to an extraordinary degree. Because if you look at what we're doing, I don't know if we're ready to talk about 8 Billion Genies yet, but if you look at what we're doing, it's very much the whole thing is a tightrope act. It's a very like how can this sustain for another issue? How can they keep this going for another issue? And it's a leap of faith for Ryan to be like, yeah, I think this guy can do it. I think, we'll do it. So far, for halfway through, I think we're in great shape.
Well, let's jump into it. I was planning on bringing it in later, but might as well bring it up now because there's something specific I wanted to talk about there. 8 Billion Genies is your upcoming image series that launches on May 11th and is soon to be on final order cutoff April 18th, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So get ordering, people. With Charles writing, Ryan on art, colors, design, and 4 covers. I mean, only 4. I mean, just for the first issue, I suppose. With letters by Chris Crank, color assist by Kevin Knipstein, and production design by Erica Schnatz. The solicit is, if you had one wish, what would you wish for? Now, what if everyone else had one wish too? At exactly the same moment, everyone on Earth gets a genie and one wish. All hell breaks loose in a very entertaining way, and that's just the beginning. I've read the first 3 issues, and I love them all. The thing I think is really interesting about it, though, and one of the weird things that attracted me to the book, besides the fact it's you two doing it, besides the fact it's this idea, which I love, is the fact that it was described on the initial image as an 8-issue special event. This idea could be an ongoing, it could be all kinds of different things, but I think it was really smart to make it an 8-issue special event, so to speak, because the finite nature allows it to keep building and building and building and building, but without it completely losing its mind. It allows you to keep grounded and to keep focused on walking that tightrope, as you were kind of talking about, Charles. Why did you want to do 8 issues? Was it because of what I'm talking about, where it just can't be an infinite idea, or is it something else?
I mean, I'll speak to this one, Ryan. I mean, this
sure.
I think the structure and a lot of it was mine, because the initial logline for this, the initial one-liner was Ryan's, and it was a as I recall, you tell the story slightly differently than I do, but there was a time when Ryan was just basically coming up with, I forget why, but just a bunch of ridiculous one-line ideas for stories that could never be told, that would never be told, just a bunch of fun, dumb stuff. And he was telling these to me, and one of them was 8 Billion Genies. Everybody at the time, it was 7 Billion Genies, because he had these ideas long enough ago that there were fewer people on the planet. And the early version of this book was, in fact, 7 Billion Genies. But he was like, everybody on Earth gets a genie. And I'm like, whoa, there really could be something with that. And he's like, no, there can't. That's stupid. But I always thought there maybe was something. And it just seemed like there always just seemed like there was some meat on the bone there. And I was like, what if I could do it as a novel? Would you let me have it? And we kind of kicked a bunch of different ways to do it around. But mostly it was like, if you can crack it, then we'll talk about it. And so I had it in the back of my head for a long time. We were looking for something to do to follow up Curse Words, and I always thought maybe this could be good because the title alone is so evocative, right? Like what is that going to mean? What's going to happen? And when I was thinking about how to break it apart and how to structure it, you'll see now that you've read the first 3 issues that there's a lot of things built into the way we're doing it that are designed from the start to get around the endlessness of an 8 Billion Genie premise, right? And so the idea of doing it as 8 issues as a finite thing was basically exactly what you said. The idea is to be able to build, to grow, to let the readers know that they're getting this isn't just nonsense, right? Which is what you might think just from the title, that there's a place we're going, that there's a plan, and there's a structure to it that will let you as a reader get your head around it too. And I think it's working better than we expected, honestly. I really feel proud of this book.
Yeah, it is working extremely well. To go from a concept that seems impossible to dial in and wrangle, and then what Charles is able to do. And a lot of it, when you're dealing with genies, a lot of it is just figuring out how you can put restrictions on this so that page 1 isn't someone saying, I wish for a million wishes, or all the workarounds, right? So I think early on, Charles figuring out the motivation of the genies and the personality of the genies and how that affects everyone's ability to wish is really smart. And he did the same thing with Curse Words, where to figure out what the restrictions on Wizard's magic were, which we laid out in the first issue. Because I guess, early on in Curse Words, Wizard's job is he's like a wizard for hire, right? So he basically is a genie. He's granting wishes for people. So it had a similar idea. I mean, his was magic, but yeah, with this book, in terms of like, it could run forever, it could go in all sorts of different directions. So what we focused on was one specific take on this idea, and we follow 8 people in a bar, and you see in the first issue, within the first issue, you see that the bartender wishes that no outside wishes could affect anyone in the bar or the bar itself, and so it becomes this safe haven for these 8 characters to kind of witness what happens to the world when everyone can wish, which is really, really smart, because if we didn't have that, we would just have characters that would be, I don't know, one panel they're a dog because someone wished everyone to be a dog, and the next panel they're ice cream because someone wished everyone to be ice cream, so that I think when Charles figured that out, that was like, all right, now we got our story, like now we got our structure. We know who the Genie's motivation and what their kind of rule set is, and we have characters that we can see what happens to the world through them because they're safe.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a sort of a second level. Well, let me expand a tiny bit on like the Genie's motivation, because I don't think these things are spoilers. I think these are the things that will bring people into the series and make them want to read it. So the Genies, there are 8 billion of them, and they really like wishes, and they like wishing done well, and they don't like they're not worried about frivolous wishing or like wishing for everybody to be a dog or whatever. Like they're kind of okay with that. What they don't like is wishes that step on other people's wishes. So they want everybody to, in a way, to be able to get their wish, and the way that they phrase it is.
Oh, I was just going to say that there was a line that perfectly explains it in the book. Wishing is an art; it brings us joy to see it practiced well.
Yes, exactly. And the intent with which the wish is made will be taken into account in the way we grant it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you're a prick, you might get a monkey's paw situation. If you're, trying to do something else, then they'll think about it differently. And so that gives you a lot of like elastic, rubber bandy leeway to get around things like everybody needs to be a chicken,
Mm-hmm.
Which I know, Ryan, you would love that. You would love it.
Ryan, would all the chickens look like the person that they were before?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course. They'd have little chicken outfits, chicken glasses, chicken hats.
Chicken mustache.
That resembled what they had before, So.
The other, actually, that brings up another really good point about because there's another formal element of the way we structured it that I think helps really well, is that each issue covers an increasing increment of time from the moment that the Genies show up, right? So the first issue is the first 8 seconds, and then the first 8 minutes. That's in issue 1. Issue 2 is the first 8 hours, first 8 days, first 8 weeks, first 8 months, and so on, all the way to the first 8 centuries in issue 8. And so that also frames the story in an interesting way, because it says, well, in the first 8 months, this is what happens to the world. These are the things that would happen in that amount of time. And it's just a way, I think, to keep the readers thinking and interested in all that stuff. But the other element that I think is crucial to the success of this book is obviously the visuals, right? Like Genies, Wish World, all those things, which is where Ryan nails it in terms of the visual inventiveness of every frame, every panel. But then you also get the Genies themselves, who are we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the Genies were going to look like, because we've seen Genies represent, there's like Will Smith and Robin Williams to, Shazam, and just all these different kinds of Kazam. What's the one that
Kazam.
Andrew Divoff.
Yeah. Well, of course, Andrew Divoff. We have to get to the Divoff.
Yeah, of course.
But the design that we settled on is sort of cartoony. It's like these little adorable little cartoony blue people who are loosely derived from another very prominent Ryan Browne character named 3D Cowboy. You can see the evolution. But the other thing that was really smart was that all of the Genies kind of look like the person who owns them, right? So everybody gets a genie, and the genie looks a little bit like that person. And so it immediately lets you connect with them. It makes them all a little bit less alien, a little bit less strange. I don't know. And that's, I never would have had that idea. And that is very emblematic of the way that Ryan and I don't know that Ryan would have come up with the formal structure of the way to do this, but I never would have thought of doing the Genies that way. So it really is a best of both worlds thing, I think, this book for both of us.
And now, a quick word from one of Off-Panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse too, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. So Ryan, I was going to bring up the fact that Ryan made them look like their Wisher. Is there a certain amount of their personality sinks into the Wisher as well? Because there's this one character, Alex, whose his genie is like somewhat judgmental in a similar way. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into that, but there is a certain amount of like even personality overlap. Not that you really, show the genie's personalities all the time outside of like those important caveats about how they wish and their feelings about wishing and everything. Is that something you did at all?
I don't think it's necessarily intentional. I think the genies are trying to have fun, which I really enjoy playing around with. In terms of, the genie being judgmental was in Charles's script, and that's the one time we see, so far in the series, the genie being kind of annoyed with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. That ends up being more of a question for Charles, whether that was intentional or, if these genies all have the same personality and just kind of look different,
I would say that's sort of a spoiler.
Okay.
That I would like to hold back for the time being.
Sure.
But it, I don't know. Just I feel like this book is just a conduit for a constant imaginative sort of. It's like just the imagination that's pouring through every page of this book on all levels, on both. We're both doing it is really turned up to 11, and it's very invigorating to work on it in much the same way the curse words was. Like any idea that either one of us had could be fit into curse words, and while 8 Billion Genies, because of the nature of it, requires a little bit more restraint just to make sure that it doesn't fly off the rails, there's still plenty of opportunities for just craziness, and that is really fun. There's the stuff with like in issue 3, prominently featured characters are Dorothy Parker, Ernest Hemingway, and Jim Morrison, who just, I don't know, and I got to write them, and Ryan got to draw them, and like it was really fun, and there's a reason for that happening in the book, and it all, I don't know, I'm just very excited for this book to be in the world, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, and for me visually, to like the most important moment for me was, like in issue 1, there's the kind of reveal of looking outside and seeing what's going on with all the wishing. And for me, it was kind of difficult because I was like, well, most people are wishing for things that don't visually really show up, right? So many people are going to wish to have all the money or, have the hot wife or sports car and stuff. Like some of that stuff you could sort of be visual, but a lot of that stuff, like the people that wish to be immortal or wish to be invisible or, like literally, how do I make that visually interesting? Because so many of the initial wishes people would make would be, these kind of straightforward things that most people want, to never get sick or whatever. So like visually, how do you really show that? But for me, when we realized, when I was trying to think about it, realizing that, oh, well, children have wishes too. And children aren't necessarily going to wish to, be immortal or whatever, right? So they're going to wish for that, whatever stuffed animal they have is real and can talk to them, right? So like once you have that, then all of a sudden visually, like you could just throw anything you want in there. Why would anyone wish for that? Well, it was a kid. That's why. And so for me, that opened up a lot of it. For the outside world where the wishes are happening, I used basically the same style as I used on curse words. But inside the bar, I try to do something a little bit more scratchy and messy. And, originally I was like, well, maybe I could make it kind of realistic in the bar. And then that would be really good in terms of contrast. But I don't really know how to do that. So I just kind of altered my style to be just a little bit more in a bar, I guess.
Yeah.
And that way, that when the genies show up, that they're these little cartoon Adventure Time knockoff characters, that there's this strong contrast between them style wise, and so they do seem otherworldly. And then when you go out into the world outside of the bar, that feels like a different world. And so I try to do that with the colors as well, to really make this thing the bar world, outside world, genies.
It's like a nightmare version of the Wizard of Oz turning into color.
Right. Yes. It's I always think about the Wizard of Oz stuff. Right. You open the door, and then all of a sudden you're in Oz. Right.
Yeah.
And originally, we even thought, like, I was thinking about maybe it would even be like even closer to black and white inside the bar. Right. Like just take out tons and tons of color. So then when the genies appear, it's a bright blue glow. And we have a little bit of that. And so, like, constantly when you're in the bar, like, when a genie's around because there's this blue glow on your character, which helps me as a colorist to, like, have something interesting being happen with the color rather than just, the same, because the palette in the bar is the same throughout the entire series, so
it's a dive bar. It's got to look like a dive bar.
Gonna look like a dive bar. And so setting the palette in the first issue, and I'm knowing that this is what I'm going to be using for the entire thing. And so, like, that did a lot of problem solving for me, and actually makes it so that I can have the brain space to color this whole thing.
You didn't color curse words. Why'd you decide to color this?
Well, I like color, and it's very important to me. And I feel like people key in on color way more than they think they do. Right. Like when you look at a comic, I feel like people frequently don't like the art or like the art because of the color, and they don't realize it. Right. And so I think in color, I draw for color. I don't spot a lot of blacks. I do a lot of rendering. So for this one, it's like we had enough lead time that I thought maybe I could do this. And then I had my friend Kevin, who I've known since childhood. And I just taught him to, like, correct flats and do color holds and do a lot of the stuff that needs an artist, but it's also, like, labor intensive and kind of boring. And he's doing a killer job. So, like, he gets me halfway through every page. So I'm really, if a page takes 4 hours to color, I'm only spending 2 hours now because I have him as an assistant. So that's another reason why, like, yes, I can now color a book. And so, yeah, that's why we're doing it.
I want to ask about those big splashier pages of showing, like, the wishes, the outside world and everything like that. And that ties into something I think is, an important part of your the way that you two work together, because as I said in the beginning, I feel like you two complement each other extremely well. And I think as an outsider, my guess would be that, Charles, your approach grounds Ryan's to a certain degree. Because, like, I think of you, Ryan, and I think of God Hates Astronauts. I think of Blast Furnace. I mean, Blast Furnace is basically just like, I don't know, what you give yourself like an hour a page, right? And then you just go buck wild with it. And so it's just like pure whatever. It's like pure id. It just is what it is. And Ryan, I feel like your inventiveness helps Charles kind of get his freak flag to fly, so to speak. It just goes wild. But I guess I might be overstating your impact on one another. But how do you feel like your differences help bring out the best in the work and even allow you both to show other sides of yourselves, especially on pages like, like when you first see the outside world and you see that a shocking amount of people have decided that they want to be kaiju. I mean, I just want to say that up front.
Yeah, that's a theme that gets repeated. We see that again. I think a lot of it just comes down to, like, confidence, maybe. Like, and this is something Ryan and I have talked about many times, about how this is a hugely collaborative medium for it to really work. And in order for it to be a hugely collaborative medium, you have to let go of yourself and give the other person room to fill in. And, I came out of a lot of bands. I was in tons and tons of different bands. And that's something that is very, I guess it sort of depends on the band, but the really good ones, everybody has a role and everybody's relying on everybody else. And it really just works. And I think that's sort of how we, like, I'm never ever worried about saying, hey, Ryan, this is the way this page feels. You can handle the specifics. This is the way I want the reader to feel when they see this. This is the emotion out. Like, a lot of times in my scripts, and I think you probably have seen this more with 8 billion than some even in curse words, right? Like, I'm very focused on the emotionality of the scenes and the pages and the panels more than I am, there are 3 lamps and also a picture on the wall of a tiger. Like, those things are not important. Those things are, if you feel like putting those in, to set the scene, be my guest. But it's really what I'm mostly concerned with is the way the reader's going to feel when they read and see the page. That's the information that Ryan needs. And then if there are things that when we come back around, because, there's always sort of a second creative pass for me after the art is in, which is not always the case when I do like, a Star Wars script or something like that. Most of the time I write those and they're basically locked, barring a couple tweaks. But with 8 Billion Genies, I come back and I'll dialogue whole sequences or re-dialogue whole sequences. Like in issue 4, Brian is going to be making up a lot of bizarre new characters. And I left the scenes open to see what he's going to do, what they're going to look like, what he's going to have them doing, and then I'll throw in the jokes. And I think, or whatever, maybe the moments of extraordinary pathos, who knows? But the idea that we can, like, I'm not even at all worried about it. Like, I know what he does is going to be spectacular, and I hope. And I don't think Ryan feels like, well, whatever I come up with is going to be solid on the back end too. Like, I'm not going to take his creativity and crap on it by doing substandard work on the dialogue pass,
Sure.
So that's it. Confidence, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all that. I certainly can't do what Charles does, and having structure helps me a lot because I don't know how to do that. So, it's just like, he cooks me a really good meal, and then I figure out what kind of great condiments to put on it. Like I really. So like when you're drawing a comic, right? I do most of my thinking when I'm thumbnailing it.
Right.
And so I thumbnail it digitally, and then I print the thumbnails out on boards, and then I pencil and ink traditionally. And so while I'm penciling, like I do all my thinking on the thumbnails, and I spend, I don't know, maybe an hour on each page. Then when I'm penciling, like my brain's kind of free, and I can like put in little details and goofs and funny sound effects and stuff. And, I know that the story is like locked in. It's really important to me that, apologies to Charles's dialogue, but it's really important to me that whatever comic I'm drawing, you can read it without any words. Like you can understand what happens. You can understand the emotions. You can understand what characters are where. So like every single thing I do, I it's really important to me that you can read it as a silent comic. Obviously, you get a much better experience when they're words, but like from storytelling, that's
much better.
Yeah, that's always my goal. So that's where I'm really trying to follow exactly what Charles wants, and then when I'm like penciling and putting little details and stuff in, that's where I can kind of add a little bit of silly goofs. And like some of my, like, I don't know, silly weird stuff, but it has a very different feel than the stuff I do by myself, because I have no ability to plan, no ability for structure. Even God Hates Astronauts, I was just making it up issue to issue, even page to page, because I don't know, like I can't see the mountains and the stars and the planets like Charles can. So that does make the work with Charles like a completely different thing than what I normally do.
Let me ask a question, Ryan, because it's something that it's not something I started with, but it's something that I've come to after writing a lot of scripts for a lot of different people, many of whom who don't have English as their first language, and just I've written for, I don't know, I don't even know how many artists at this point, but it's an enormous number. And one of the things that I really try to make sure of, to the extent I can, is the artist understands why every scene is, like, understands the story they're telling, right? Like gets the point of it, even if it's just one issue in a larger story. Like understands, all right, I understand why this panel is here. I understand why these people are staring at each other, and what this panel, what this is supposed to mean in the larger context of the page and the issue, and in theory, the bigger story that's being told. And so I guess that's the question. Like, am I actually succeeding at that, or are you often just like, well, I have no idea why the hell he wants me to draw a balloon, but I guess I'll draw a balloon?
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. I always get it, right, from your scripts. I always get it. That's never an issue. And I think, like, in terms of economy of storytelling, like these issues, especially in 8 Billion Genies, we only have 8 issues. Like, stuff's really tight. And I know it. Like, issue 3 was 27 pages, and issue 4, which I just read the script for, and it's just phenomenal. And it's probably going to be 27 pages again. Like, I can already see from your script you're trying to fit it in as economically as possible. And I totally see what you're doing. And I'm like, boy, that would be good on 2 pages instead of 1, kind of thing. So,
well, that's the advantage of funding our own book, right? We can do that,
Right.
And hopefully won't go broke, but
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing that complements the one thing that you guys do really well together is like your visual inventiveness, Ryan, and Charles, your like meticulous planning, you're seeing the mountain and everything like that. Those things, I think both with curse words and especially with this, I'm not one for fan theories. I'm not one who reads and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to happen or something like this. But 8 Billion Genies, I have so many theories. I have a lot of theories, most oriented around the bartender, Will Williams. I have a lot of ideas about that guy. He's a very interesting character. The name of the bar is very interesting to me. There's a lot of fascinating things that have been decided in the process of making of this book. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about, I think that's why I said that you two complement each other really well in a way that, I don't know, it's weird. Saying this almost sounds demeaning, but you know what I'm saying? It's like you're greater than the sum of your parts. You're both really good, but you bring out the best in both of each other. Yep. When I read it, it's like really anything is possible. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it. And I would, fitting to the idea of a book that's based around wishes and like people coming up with these ideas is like, I feel like any of my theories could be true, or they could just be like these people in these situations are very strange. And I've come up with my own ideas around them. But you two have done a really good job of stoking flames that might not be there if you didn't complement each other so well, if that makes sense.
I know what you mean. It was looser. Again, I knew where we're going. I knew the ending. I knew the last scene, but a lot of it hadn't popped in, right, for me, because I hadn't needed to, because I'm kind of finding a lot of this as I go, even though I know what each of the 8 time periods is and the 8 issues. But then we needed to, because, fingers crossed, right? We're going to see if anybody out in Hollywood wants to mess around with this idea. And so in order to do that, I had to develop a pitch document for it that was much more detailed, that I needed to go in and really explain what happens in issue 7 and why, and issue 6 and why, and what happens to these characters in more detail. And so I think that was I knew a lot of that in my head, or at least I knew the feeling of it in my head, but it was the first time Ryan had seen it. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how some of those ideas play out in his designs and what he's going to choose to do now that he knows where we're headed in more detail than he did before, and who's going to be important moving forward, and I don't know, all of that stuff. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and because we're doing it over such a long time period, the final issue being 8 centuries, for me, I'm about to start on issue 4, and I'm starting to think about aging. And, I've been thinking a lot about costuming and, realized in issue 3, when we were doing the first 8 days, it was like, well, are these people going to be wearing the same clothes the entire time and they're in there? And then we started thinking about, they're wearing merchandise from the bar, like T-shirts that the bar manufactures, and
the band,
the band that was playing there had merch. So they're all, they're all cycling through wearing shirts for the band, the shirt they came in on, and then the bar shirt. But then as they start to age, I'm starting to think about that. Do their hair grow long? Do they grow a beard? Do they get fat? Do they get skinny? Like things like that are going to be really fun to imagine the different stages of these characters through their lives.
I think it was before we started, but I don't even think about the weather outside half the time. So the idea that I've got Ryan there to back me up and think of what's going to happen to June Green over 8 months and 8 years, all of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, somebody could have wished for sunny weather.
Charles, there's a visual thing that I've been doing in the series that I've never told you about, that I'm going to continue to do for the rest of the series, and I'll tell you when we're done. And I'm curious if you will ever see it. It's a little Easter egg that if I told the people right now, it would spoil a lot. So,
well, okay, I will watch for it, and I probably will not figure it out because I only read the words. I don't even art. It's just not my department. It's not my department. I barely even look at it. I know it's there. I know it's there, but I have a disorder called art blindness, Ryan. I should have told you this a long time ago, but that's why I mostly just let you do your thing, because I don't even see it. I don't
Yeah.
see
This is why you originally envisioned it as a novel.
it. Absolutely. To me it is a novel. Just very, very dialogue heavy novel.
Charles, you mentioned the confidence that you have in each other. And like, I talk to a lot of creative teams, and they always say that, like, the big thing you kind of get, especially when you work more together, is like you start developing trust that the other person is going to, I'm going to give them a script and this is how they're going to do it. But even if it's not precisely how you imagine, they're going to bring out the best version of it. You work together on Curse Words with 25 issues over just under 3 years. I mean, did you guys have that trust and confidence pretty quickly? Like, did you know that like the other person was going to do what they were going to do? Or is that something you had to build?
I think it was there pretty early.
Yeah.
My own personal confidence in my art. Some of the early Curse Words issues, you can tell how kind of nervous I was. And stuff was stiff. And
why were you nervous? Because it was like slightly different for you or something?
I mean, it was a big project. Obviously the most eyeballs were going to be on that book of anything I've ever done. And then trying to make sure that I'm making Charles happy and, making the vision what he wants it to be. So you can tell, like, early issues of Curse Words, there's some poor thinking on my part. There's some things that aren't designed right. And I kind of work them out over time. And so there are some continuity issues and stuff as it goes forward, as I kind of figure it out. But honestly, the same thing happened with 8 Billion Genies. I don't know, a few weeks ago, before we started sending out the PDF to everyone, I went and redrew a bunch of the first issue. I redrew, Genie designs were all completely wrong. Will Williams was too grounded in reality in the first couple pages, and Robbie, the 12-year-old, looked like a small man. So, like, because I mean, I didn't know what the style was going to be. So that's some of it, but also just like, I knew what we were doing with 8 Billion Genies, but I think both of us have figured out way more of what we're actually doing by making it. Yep. Like it came into focus maybe with issue 2 or so, where like what exactly was going to happen here, and what, at least for me, like what exactly was going to be happening here, and what this story was going to be about, and that. So then I have that, like, all right, I'm going back into the files. I'm going to redraw some stuff in issue 1. And so, and a lot of that stuff, we did a preview issue for C2E2 in December, and a lot of that stuff is in there. So if you have that preview issue, you'll see the art is different in the final issue.
I do have it. I want to compare it now.
Valuable collector's item.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think with Curse Words, like we redid. I mean, it's not just the art and bad choices made there. Like this is shameful to admit, but we ended up redoing, I think, 2/3 of the first issue, right? Some like crazy amount of it. Like and that was not because of art issues. It was because of story issues. Like the first version of issue 1 in script form was just not what it needed to be. And we didn't get there until well into it. And that's on me, I think, for not having it clear in my head the way that I needed it to be. Whereas 8 Billion Genies, at least in terms of like issue 1 and how that was structured and how it was going to be formatted, I think that for me, the feeling of it, like, because a lot of times when I write any issue, I have a sense of the totality of like what the issues should feel like, what the way the reader should be left after the end of it. The way that it feels in my head is very complete, right? Like I know what I'm writing for, and then it's really just like sort of shading and details. And so with 8 Billion Genies #1, I think I was very, very close to that. I don't think I did a bunch of rewriting or fiddling around with it. I think issue 2 was similar. Issue 3, I did a decently significant pass just to dial it in a little bit. But then, issue 4, I guess what I'm getting at is that I feel like this one is just tighter from the beginning, at least from a script standpoint. And maybe that's just because of the premise. Like with Curse Words, we really had this wide open set of world building where we could kind of do whatever we felt like doing. And that's good and bad. But with 8 Billion Genies, because we really wanted to put the readers on like a roller coaster, right? Like a thrill ride that goes through a very specific set of twists and turns and tracks and drops and loops and all those things. So in order for that to work, you kind of have to play. You can't just, yeah, I mean, I guess you can build one like from scratch, building those twists and turns as you go, but that's how the roller coaster collapses and people die. People die from that,
Yeah. I did want to talk about the jokes element because, I mean,
and with that, let's talk about jokes.
Charles, I imagine you get tired of Ryan getting all of the credit for the jokes. I mean, he's the funny guy. I mean, I'm just kidding. I'm sure you're not the. But it is interesting though, because it's like comics by its, or as a medium, we always have a tough time with attribution. It's like who did what. It's like Ryan drew everything, so he's like the guy who did all of the crazy things that are on the splash page. True, and then there's also details like a thing I loved in the first issue. This is the world's smallest spoiler that's ever existed. I loved the Mango Unchained beer. It was a very nice touch. I don't even know if it's very well done. The decision-making process of jokes, like for things like that, not necessarily the beer, but for like the wish pages, the ones where you see like the insanity on the page. Do you two discuss the types of things you want to see, or Ryan, are you just like going buck wild on the page and just making whatever happens?
Well,
go ahead.
Some of the detail stuff, I just throw in there. But a lot of the jokes are written. Certainly ones that are dialogue are written, but then, there's one scene in issue 2 where the genies are doing a thumb war, and it's really fun, that they're kind of occupying themselves that way, and that's in the script. And so they're visual jokes that are in the script, of course. And then, especially the stuff in Antarctica on issue 3, the beginning, that was all script stuff. So a lot of it is script. And then some of it is me sliding some things in or emoting, and like in issue 3 with the genie playing the guitar, that wasn't in the script, but then specifically, but then Charles does a lettering pass and like incorporates things like that. So it really is like we're both writing jokes in this, and it's part of the freedom of working back and forth with it, so that like I'm adding on top of what Charles is doing, and then he's adding on top of what I'm doing, and hopefully they all kind of work together.
I think you can. I was going to say you could sort of have a rule of thumb that if it's a spoken joke, it's mine, and if it's a drawn joke, it's Ryan's. But that's not completely true. There are exceptions to that. But honestly, I don't think it matters that much. I think that, I think we're both very funny to each other. Like we make each other laugh all the time. We have different but very complementary senses of humor. And thank God they sort of seem to relate. Like people seem to connect with them, because it's weird, a lot of the things that make us laugh and the things that we find funny. But, a lot of it is, that is what a joke is, right? Like, I don't think people tell jokes that they don't find funny, like it's always, we're amusing ourselves, and at the same time, we're amusing each other. I put those reference images in the scripts for Ryan, primarily so that he can understand and doesn't fuck it up, but also because I want the experience of reading the script to be like a good time. I want it to be fun, and it's fun for me to make that stuff and fun for me to include it. And, we had to send a bunch of as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get this set up as maybe a TV or film thing, and so I had to send some of those scripts to the person who's helping us do that over in LA, and I was like, so when you read this, be aware that a lot of this is not supposed to go out to the public. A lot of this is really just for Ryan, and it's really emblematic of the way that we connect and work. And she's like, okay, sure. But anyway, it was it is, I don't know, it's funny. Maybe we'll publish a script book someday. With the best of the references.
I will say, to your point about people telling jokes that they know aren't funny, my wife would definitely say that I do that. I disagree.
Well, that's the thing, right? You think they're funny. They're the best jokes of all time.
I think they're hilarious. Exactly. But I'm not going to go too in depth on this. But the framing devices, I think, are an interesting mix for you too, though, because it's like the framing devices of 8 seconds, the 8-second update, the 8-minute update, all those different things. Those are really interesting pages to me because they say so much. Mm-hmm. Like there's like a count on population. There's like an update on what the Earth looks like, which is a lot more complicated than people might imagine when I just say those words. It's really interesting because it's such a perfect, I mean, like those are perfect comic pages in my idea. They were like a brilliant decision to include those because it's a perfect update, but also it's like a amazing fusion of art and words. In my mind, like I think back to like I wrote this feature years ago about the Marvel Universe trading cards from back in the 90s and about how like I learned from like Bob Budiansky and Tom Brevoort that all those numbers were made up in the first series, and it was very upsetting to me. But for your numbers, in my head, those numbers you guys discussed a lot because you knew that like the joke depended on, or like not necessarily the joke, but the seriousness of the situation, but also the joke depended on what the delta between those two numbers were. Did you guys discuss that a lot?
I don't think that was one of those ones that was kind of fully formed. Like there was in the earliest versions of this, there was a Google Doc that it was called, what do you call it? Like the idea sheet. And I'm going to pull it up because it had a very, you did something that made me laugh. It's called the 8 Billion Genies idea sheet.
I love it.
And Ryan set it up, which was very nice. And he wrote a single line at the start of it. It said, "Here we go. Let's start writing all these great ideas down. Okay, go." And I responded to that saying, "That's it? Hey, Charles, write down some good ideas. Great." And then I started. And so I wrote from there, I don't know, many ideas. One of which is the third one. The third one was, we should watch Wishmaster 1 through 4 in Ryan's Basement Theater all in one day. That's a very good idea. But which we didn't end up doing together, but Ryan gave me for my birthday, right? A Blu-ray DVD of all four Wishmasters on one DVD. So
you should frame that.
That's an incredibly happy birthday right there.
Yeah. But then, the fourth slug here is the timeline of the 8 issues would work like so. Issue 1, the first 8 minutes. Issue 2, the first 8 hours, going up the first 8 centuries, whatever. And then I go, like, there's a lot in this that is there. And this was just me, like, it snapped into my head relatively quickly. But then if you roll down, I do issue summaries of issues 1 all the way through issue 8. And in that first one is then we then get the first title card via a full splash text only. The first 8 seconds, human population 8 billion, genie population 8 billion. And so then the idea that the Earth would be present was originally just going to be words, but then the idea of adding a visual element to it so that we could show how the Earth changes and evolves over the course of the 800 years that our story covers. That I think came a little bit later and just came out of the idea of this is a comic, let's do something visual. Like people, if they want to read, they'll read a novel.
Yeah, I think once that first script came in, the original design of that page is almost entirely text on like a star background with like a tiny little Earth, which I put together and painted this little Earth and sent to Charles, and he said no. And so then we were like, all right, well, the Earth should be front and center, and then we started talking about like, all right, so wouldn't it be fun to see how it changes over time? Which, that again, those pages are really hard for me. Those are big brain benders for me where I just kind of start drawing on this globe that I painted and then figuring it out. And, there's directions in the script, but then I'm like, I add a lot of stuff and, but those take an incredible amount of thought. And I left those for last on every issue because it's too hard to like, that's for Ryan of the future to figure out what the hell is going to be on this.
Where will Dougland be?
And I actually am pretty excited. The 1 in 4 is very specific of what the Earth needs to look like. And I'm pretty excited to figure that one out.
That'll be cool.
And now, a quick word from one of Off-Panel's sponsors. That sponsor's Bad Idea. Bad Idea paid for the sponsorship, but they won't give me anything to promote since they're over. So here I am, saying the name Bad Idea. Contractually. I have to. That's it. Bad Idea. Their thing, I guess. And now, back to the show. So, I gotta bring up Wishmaster. The first issue has covers from Jenny Frison and Declan Shalvey. I mentioned before we started recording that you have an incredible Andrew McLean variant for number 2. These are great. Ryan, you do a number of covers. But you have an Andrew Divoff Famous Genies variant featuring the actor's character from Wishmaster. And let me just say, I think this is true. When I Googled Andrew Divoff Genie to figure out what movie that was from, because I've never seen Wishmaster. The first result was a retailer's page about that cover, which is incredible.
Love it.
So clearly, whatever you're doing is working. I have to ask though,
Yep.
how the hell did that cover happen? Like, do you have to ask? Do you have to ask somebody for that? I assume you have to ask for permission or something.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That's officially licensed.
Yep, that is officially licensed. So we had the idea to do well. We want to have a good time. We want to make sure the fans have a good time.
Right.
And so there's lots of ways for people to enjoy what we do, and I think our fan base enjoys when we do things that are unusual and a little off the beaten path, like the Wizard Van Tour or whatever. And so we were trying to figure out what we would do that would be fun for variant covers for this. And obviously getting an actual genie on the cover seemed like it would be a really good idea. And we kicked around, some of the genies are off limits for tragic reasons because they are not around anymore. And others are probably outside of our ability to reach and contact. But there was a genie who really hit right in the sweet spot of power, of magical power, and our ability to like get them to talk to us, and that was Andrew Divoff. And so I reached out to through some of my people to figure out who represented him, and got their contact information, sent an email and said, this is what we're looking to do. And I will say that from the beginning, he was open to the idea, but confused, which makes perfect sense. It is a really weird request that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we haggled a little bit. It was great. We had a negotiation through his manager and figured out a number that would work for everybody in terms of what it would cost to license his likeness to work on our cover. He then sent a digital file of that to us, which Ryan started to work on for the cover, and then realized it wasn't quite high res enough, and so he had to. Ryan actually ordered where did you get it? Was it eBay?
It was on eBay, yeah.
So he ordered a physical copy of the same headshot
Oh my God.
off eBay and got it sent to him and did a high-res scan of that, which is what ended up becoming the cover. And,
yeah, I had to spend $50 on it because it's a signed headshot.
Did you deduct that from Andrew's appearance fee?
No.
No.
I'm just
You can't.
No,
Look, the last person you want to mess around with on a deal is the Wishmaster, right? Like you make a deal, you stick with it.
So he's in the first two and they're hilarious. His performance, especially in 2, is just incredible. When Wishmaster goes to prison, that is really him playing a genie in prison is excellent. And easily my favorite genie moments ever. So I'm personally a huge fan, and so this was very exciting to me.
Yep.
But yes, the picture he had, the only version he had, was extremely low res, and so first I painted over the whole thing, and it looks all right, but it's a little not real, and so that's why I was like, this picture's got to exist somewhere. So I found it on eBay and I bought it and scanned it. So
eBay has everything.
You got to commit to the bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yes, most people have told me they don't think that covers a joke. It's not a joke. We are doing it.
Yeah.
It is a real cover.
It's very real. Andrew requested copies of it that he is going to sell presumably at his convention appearances, which is very exciting. We're gonna try to get him to record some sort of video for us to endorse the series, and hopefully he'll do it in the Wishmaster voice. I don't know we have a lot of hopes revolving around this gentleman, and he's already delivered way more than we ever expected he would. So if he wants us to like go off with our little comic and live our lives, we will. But man, there's a dream version of this where like we all go on a van tour again and Andrew's with us,
I was gonna throw that out there. I mean, the Andrew Divoff van tour, the Wishmaster van tour, I love it.
Yeah, that's the dream. I don't know, but it would be. Could you imagine a month in the van with Andrew? Wow.
I don't know anything about him.
You would after the van.
Yeah, you would.
We checked him out on Twitter to make sure he wasn't like a huge monster, and he seems like a good guy. So
yeah,
that's incredible.
He's either got a vineyard or a brewery. I think it's a brewery that he likes a lot and is into, that he runs. I should
do a label design. I'll trade him a label design. How about that?
Sure. I mean, the thing is we're about to enter into negotiations round 2, which is asking him to do a little, video clip for us and, hold up his phone basically and do something. And so I don't know, I'll throw that in as a sweetener, Ryan. Do you want to piece of original Ryan Browne art.
Yeah, you could do that. And also, I feel like he should wear the eye patch he wore in Lost. That'd be good. And does he have that eye patch sitting around?
I'm sure he does. That's you don't leave a prop like that behind. But
one of my favorite parts about this cover is the fact that it's like a 1 in 10 variant, I think, where you have to order 10 copies to be able to order one.
Yeah.
Which means that there's going to be like, I mean, not that this was your plan, but there's going to be like speculator apps out there that are like touting this picture of Andrew Divoff's face. Yeah. They'll be like, you got to get this one because it's the super scarce one. And I'm like, I love the fact that there's people running around the country being like, get me the Divoff.
Is he in the comic? No. Does he have anything to do with the comic? No.
Nope. Does that matter? No.
Just kind of a goof that 95% of people won't get. And we're fine with that.
I just have a couple more things I want to say. One thing I really want to emphasize that I think that is one of the greatest strengths of this book. I've read 3 issues. This is not a spoiler. I cannot decide whether the genies are nefarious or if we are. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this book is it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like the Pulp Fiction briefcase, but the briefcase is wide open to us and I still can't tell what it is.
Yeah, it's a book about, need and want and desire. And there's a phrase where that pops up in issue 4 that I wrote it down, so of course I'm going to like it. It's like kind of like your own jokes, right? Like I'm a fan of most of the things I put in scripts, but there's a point where some things are talked about, and one character describes the world as being turned into a crucible of want, right? So like the idea is that we're already in a world where our individual wants are in conflict with one another, right? The things that I want might or might not align with the things that you want. And if there was only one meal left on Earth, you and I, maybe we'd split it, maybe we wouldn't split it, maybe I would take it and stomp your face in so I could eat it, I don't know. It's looking at a world that has become sort of that stark, right? Where everybody, at least initially, has the ability to make one of their dreams come true, one of their wishes come true, like make something real that isn't real. Like, how does that manifest across the species when we are not typically that great at being selfless? We're kind of a selfish species. And, at the same time, the genies came here and gave us the ability to have this world. So what do they want? What are they doing? Why is this happening? So you, after reading 3 issues, the way you're reacting is exactly correct. You're supposed to feel that way. And it doesn't really stop as the series continues. Like it goes, we've been describing it kind of as this very kind of thoughtful thing wrapped in a candy coated shell. It's like an M&M with a I don't know, a genie inside. And so you read it for the gags and the goofs and the Ryan Browne craziness and all that stuff. But then as you go along, you hopefully, with every issue, with every increment of time, particularly, you're thinking about different things, and it's pushing your mind and your heart to different places. Like, there's a lot going on with this book, and I hope people check it out.
Yeah, and with from a design standpoint, I kind of unintentionally, the character of Alex is wearing a vintage Detroit Pistons Bad Boys shirt, which was like, it's set in Metro Detroit area, the book is, and where I grew up, and that shirt was the Detroit Bad Boys shirt. Everybody had that shirt. It's like a basketball with a skull and crossbones on it, and so he's wearing a vintage one of those, and I just did that because I like drawing that shirt. That's a cool shirt, it's very location specific. But then when I drew his genie also has that shirt on. Mm-hmm. So his genie has a little basketball with a skull on it. And so I put him on the front cover because you got a cute little dude wearing a skull on his shirt. And so it kind of, to me, like accidentally was like summing up this book in terms of like, it's super fun, but it's also really scary. And, what is really going on here? It seems like the greatest thing in the world until you actually think about it. So that little genie kind of became the poster genie for the book, almost accidentally, because I just wanted to draw that shirt.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that the most rational person in the entire book when it comes to, or like the one who has the most thoughtful process to their decision making, is the child in the bar. That is a very nice touch. And also, it's just, I love like that Robbie and also Will Williams and his like immediate decision making. I love those two just because of the immediate confidence of knowing what the right action to do is. And the other one is just like, I need to go through this process. Granted, the process results in what I will say is, I don't know if it's the best decision, but it's a cool decision. So we'll go with that.
It looks great.
He looks great. He looks great.
Let's say that much. That is one of my favorite things you've ever done, and it is so perfect. It is like Ryan has this ability to design things that you're like, no one would ever have thought of that but him. But then when you see it, you're like, well, obviously there was no other choice. That was what it needed to be. And the result of Robbie's Wish is a very good example of that, I think, especially because that character like hangs out for a while. I mean, you know what happens to him, and so we're going to get to see that design evolve over quite a bit of time, which will be very interesting, because I don't want the signature element of that design to change at all. Like, I think it should always be that. And we're talking around this, but there's a just listen to this after you've read issue 3 and you'll know.
Yeah, that design, along with the armor design that I did in issue 2. I'm not a good planner. Like, both of those, the first time I ever drew them was on those pages that you're seeing them. So and I did the same thing with curse words. There were a lot of those wizards and stuff. There's no design sheet. There's no behind the scenes material. There's nothing, right? Like if we did a big special edition of 8 Billion Genies, I think I have 2 drawings that I did before starting. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just making it up. And then I realized it's fun to put all these details in the one drawing, but then when you have to draw them over and over again, as that armor that I had to draw in issue 3 over and over again, that's pretty rough. So
it's pretty good though. I like it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, last question I'm going to ask. I know you're going to get asked what you would wish for a lot in these interviews. I'm not going to ask that. I will ask though, having probably considered the downsides of the whole idea a whole lot, would you want a one-off genie if you were the only one that had it?
If I was the only one, yes.
Yeah, if I was the only one,
that changes it completely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's just everyone having one that becomes problematic.
Right, because it changes everything, right? You don't know what the world is because someone could change it in an instant. So I don't know how you wish for a world that you don't know what the world is.
Yeah.
You can think of somebody in your head right now, and when I say this, somebody's gonna pop in your head right now. You're going to think of, maybe you know them, maybe you read about them, maybe they just exist in the world, but there's somebody who you're like, oh, fuck, if that person gets a wish, that's a real problem, right?
There's a lot of people that come to mind.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like, multiply that by whoever you thought of, there's millions and millions, probably billions of that person. So it is not a good thing, especially when you layer that with the idea that humanity has some questionable tendencies, isn't always selfless the way maybe you would want them to be. And so, but we explore all that. That's part of the story. That's part of what you're reading. Like, the idea that everybody has a chance at their own greatest desire, and the good and bad of that is what the book is.
I appreciate, and this I think is a good thing to emphasize to listeners, is one thing that's really smart about the book is you both have the grounded, focused story that surrounds this bar that is like unaffected by things around it, and that's like the heart of the book. But I like that you also take us into other places where wishes are happening. Like there's a sequence where wishes cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And that is really smartly done, because I'm sure a lot of people would be wondering what is happening in this exact scenario. And then you find out, and it's just really well done. I will say, I don't think I would want to have a wish. And the reason for that is I have like regrets sometimes after ordering the wrong thing on a menu. I cannot even imagine the mental anguish I would go through considering my wish. It would be so stressful. I don't need that stress in my life.
Yeah, it would be tough. It would be really, really tough. I'd have Charles is a lawyer, so I'd have him help me figure out like the best way to do it.
Because phrasing, intent matters.
Yeah.
Yep, it sure does.
Write like a contract.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about 8 Billion Genies, the way you work, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks very much for having us on, and obviously we hope people check out 8 Billion Genies. It's out from Image Comics on May 11th, and the order cutoff is April 18th. So if you want it, any cover, including that Divoff cover that we talked about, tell your shop by April 18th, and they'll be able to get it for you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Charles Soule and artist Ryan Browne. You can find Soule and Browne on Twitter at Charles Soule and Ryan Browne Art and their work in the upcoming 8 Billion Genies at Image. Also, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this podcast. If it sounds better this week, it's because of her. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Ben Damstead, Cameron Brown, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submit Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslem, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode